Well, Evelyn has already done 2 points of my message today, so this could be very short. Don't count on it. I was looking this week at what was happening in the lives of the disciples immediately after the resurrection. I found a very interesting theme wound through each account and story of Jesus appearing and revealing himself, resurrected and alive. Now, Ed told me to tell you that he's not unhappy about the sermon so far. He's got to pick up Jackie at 12:39, so hurry, son. I don't want you in trouble. She's coming into the airport at 12:39, so we understand, and I just thought I'd embarrass him before you left. Would you walk through these accounts with me, please, starting with Matthew 28. This was immediately after the resurrection. And really, Matthew has the briefest, the most terse little report, just 2 or 3 verses there at the end of Matthew after the resurrection. But this is the first little section. It says, "Then the 11 disciples left for Galilee, going to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some of them doubted." Underline that part if you mark in your Bible. Some of them doubted. Now, when had Jesus told them that he would meet them at a particular place after the resurrection? Well, actually, we find 2 accounts of this. In Matthew 26, on the way to the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus took them for his time of prayer, he told them, "Tonight every one of you will desert me. For the scriptures say God will strike the shepherd and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I have been raised from the dead, I will go ahead of you to Galilee and meet you there." A specific promise. And then we find in the 28th chapter, the 5th verse, this is in the tomb after the resurrection. Angel is speaking to Mary. He says, "Don't be afraid. I know you're looking for Jesus who was crucified. He isn't here. He's risen from the dead just as he said he would. Come and see where his body was lying. And now go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead and he is going ahead of you to Galilee." He's waiting at the meeting place. Isn't that cool? Jesus was specific enough to say, "Now guys, I'm going to die, I'm going to rise again, and here's where we're going to meet." I was listening to the radio this week and they were talking about that every family needs to have an emergency plan, that if something happens in your household or in your community to where the family is scattered, you need to have a meeting place. Now, if you don't have that in your family, if you don't do anything else from this sermon, but please do, go today over lunch and set a meeting place for your family. It can be very critical. Jesus did it. He set a meeting place. He told them he was going to rise from the dead. He meets them there. And yet, some of them doubted. How do you do that? I mean, he was dead. He is alive. He is here. He's meeting with us. And we're saying, "I don't believe my eyes." And it wasn't just something they said. They really doubted it. How? I don't get it. Now, let's look at another account. Mark 16. Starting with verse 9. Jesus rose from the dead early on Sunday morning. The first person who saw him was Mary Magdalene, the woman for whom he had cast out 7 demons. She went to the disciples who were grieving and weeping and told them what had happened. But when she told them that Jesus was alive and she had seen him, they didn't believe her. You're delusional, girl. You don't know what you're saying. Didn't believe him. Afterward, he appeared in a different form to 2 of his followers. We'll even deal in more detail about that in a moment because Evelyn's already kind of been there. Who were walking from Jerusalem into the country. They rushed back to tell the others, but no one believed them. didn't believe Mary. They didn't believe these guys either. Still later, Jesus appears to the 11 disciples. This is in verse 14. As they were eating together, I love this line. He rebuked them for their stubborn unbelief because they refused to believe those who had seen him after he had been raised from the dead. Now, to me, this is one of the strongest points of what I'll share today. Jesus recognized and pointed out not just that they had trouble believing, but that they chose not to believe. When you're stubborn, who's in control? You are, or you think you are. I saw that. You think you are, and they refused to believe. They had made up their mind. This is really wild. This is the one Jesus, these are the ones Jesus kept telling was going to happen, kept telling them this was the hope of the ages, kept telling them to prepare themselves, and then they come to the place that they say, he's dead, I know he's dead, I saw him dead, and he's dead. Done. Over. Forget the facts. I don't care what you see. He's dead. These are disciples that have come to the place convinced. Don't confuse me. Then he told them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. Look at this. Anyone who believes and is baptized will be saved. But anyone who refuses to believe, he could have been pointing to them. The disciples, anyone who refuses to believe will be lost. And miraculous signs will accompany those who believe. Now let's go on into Luke, into that expanded story of the two guys walking along the way. That same day, two of Jesus' followers were walking to the village of Emmaus, 7 miles from Jerusalem. As they walked along, they were talking about everything that had happened. They talked and discussed these things. Jesus himself suddenly came and began walking with them. But God kept them from recognizing him. I think that's a cool line. So Jesus asked them, what are you discussing so intently as you walk along? They stopped short, sadness written across their faces. One of them, Cleopas, replied, you must be the only person in Jerusalem who hasn't heard of all the things that have happened here these last few days. If you don't think there's humor in the Bible, you're just not reading the same one I am. I think this is funny. You don't know what has happened? He is what has happened. What things, Jesus asked? The things that happened to Jesus, the man from Nazareth, they said. He was a prophet who did powerful things, and he was a mighty teacher in the eyes of God and everybody. And our leading priests and all the religious leaders handed him over to be condemned to death, and they crucified him. We had hoped that he was the Messiah who had come to rescue Israel. This all happened 3 days ago. Some women from our group of his followers were at the tomb early this morning. They came back with an amazing report. They said his body was missing, and they had seen angels who told them that Jesus was alive. Some of our men ran out to see, and sure enough, his body was gone, just as the women said. Then Jesus said to them, you foolish people, you find it so hard to believe. You find it hard to believe the prophets. All of this has been written in the scriptures. Wasn't it clearly predicted that the Messiah would have to suffer all these things before entering his glory? Then Jesus took them through the writings of Moses and all the prophets, Old Testament 101, explaining from all the scriptures the things concerning himself. Boy, I'd like to have heard that teaching. Wouldn't that have been amazing? For Jesus to have walked through Isaiah and said, it's me. It's me, right? By this time they were nearing Emmaus, and at the end of their journey, Jesus acted as if he was going on, but they begged him to stay the night, since it was getting late. So he went home with them, and as they sat down to eat, he took the bread and blessed it. He broke it, gave it to them. And suddenly, their eyes were opened. They recognized him. And at that moment, he disappeared. I just love the story. Then they said to each other, as Evan read for us, didn't our hearts burn within us? As he talked with us on the road and explained the scriptures to us. Within the hour, they were on their way back to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 disciples and the others who had gathered with them. And they said, the Lord has really risen. He really has. He appeared to Peter, and the two from Emmaus told their story of how Jesus had appeared to them as they were walking along the road and how they recognized him as he was breaking the bread. And just as they were telling this story, poof, he was gone. Poof, he's back. Jesus was suddenly standing there among them. Peace be with you, he says. I've got a feeling that was needed. I think there was a little bit of fury at that moment. Peace be with you. The whole group was startled and frightened, thinking they were seeing a ghost. Why are you so frightened? Jesus asked. Why are your hearts filled with doubt? Again, it just seems so unbelievable to me that standing face to face with the resurrected Christ, they're still not believing what even they're seeing. Jesus said, look at my hands and my feet. You can see that it's really me. Touch me if you want and make sure that I'm not a ghost. Ghosts don't have bodies, as you see that I do. As he spoke, he showed them his hands and his feet. Still, verse 41 says, still they stood there in disbelief. With joy and with wonder. That says to me, mixed emotions. I mean, they're not sure what they feel. They're scared. They're thrilled. They wonder what's happened. All this is going through their minds at once. It reminded me as I thought of this, of the one time when Jesus, a man came to him and said, I think this is the one where his daughter was sick, and he said, will you come and heal me? Heal her. And Jesus asked him in the conversation, he said, do you believe? And the guy says, yes, I believe. Help thou my unbelief. This man was being very honest with the Lord. I've got belief, but in the mixture of that, I've got some unbelief. I need your help with my unbelief. And at this moment, the disciples were in that mixed up moment. They were afraid, they were doubtful, but they were filled with joy and with wonder. Do you have anything to eat? Jesus said. And so they gave him some broiled fish, and he ate as they watched, I'm sure amazed. And he said, when I was with you before, I told you that everything written about me in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms must be fulfilled. And he opened their minds to understand the scriptures. One last story. And it's in John chapter 20. That Sunday evening, the disciples were meeting behind locked doors because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders. Suddenly, Jesus was standing there among them. Peace with you. And I think this is the same story we just referred to, but it has a further involvement. Down in verse 24, it says, one of the 12 disciples, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, was not with the others when Jesus came. They told him, we've seen Jesus. And Thomas replied, what? I won't believe.